Hello and welcome to Building Your T-Shirt Empire. I'm Cole, and with me as always is Gavin. Today we have Nick Gawreluk, who is from Print Profit, and we have a really interesting conversation. Today we're going to be talking about why it is that regardless of how many shirts you print, you're not making an actual profit. So I'm excited to jump into it. I know that this is a common experience for a lot of print shop owners. Normally everyone talks gross. We did 750K this month. We did 2 million or not this month, 750K this year, 2 million this year, 10 million this year. And then you start talking to owners and you're like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm saving to buy a house in 10 years. And it's like, I thought you did 2 million. What's going on, bro? So I wanted to do this topic, especially with Nick, because he's really good at deep diving into the numbers and finding out those pain points for people. And I think it's going to be a really good conversation for everyone. So Nick, if you could give everyone a quick introduction about yourself and your background.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. It was awesome seeing you guys over in Impressions, Long Beach. Yep. So Nick Gawreluk, born and raised up in snowy and cold Minnesota. I fell into print by accident when I was in high school, about 15 years old. And my high school had a screen printing, almost like a mid-sized company in it, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. So running that student-run business, kind of doing left brain, right brain. I fell in love with print. And long story short, I spent about 15 years traveling all around, seeing the industry from different angles.
Very cool. And then once you got into adulthood, did you go straight into a print shop or did you go into a different part of the industry?
Yeah, so since I was in high school, every summer I would work for big commercial printing companies in my neighborhood and really roll up my sleeves and see how does a printing company actually work. And then throughout the journey, I went to really big printing companies. The largest was $2.5 billion in annual sales.
What?
With a B, baby, with a big old B.
Okay.
And then also seeing our industry from the software side or working for I worked for HP Indigo, if anyone knows that, companies who actually make the equipment that we buy in our print shops.
So what was that initial transition from you going from a fairly, corporate structure to let's just do our own thing, sling our own product? What made you do that transition?
It was a big move. I'll say I've been to over 40 countries around the world as part of my time in the industry. So I've had conversations, worked with shops, hundreds, all different shapes and sizes. But get this, everywhere around the world, Asia, Middle East, Brazil, US, Germany, those printing companies all struggle to understand their profit and see it clearly. So from my perspective, I love this industry. It's given me a lot of opportunity. Love the people that are in it. And I'm like, man, we got to help modernize print. And we work way too hard. We take on too much risk. And it's expensive, right? We got rent, payroll, equipment. I'm like, I just have a heart for print. And I see an area where we need to elevate. And that's where I'm like, I'm all in on starting Print Profit and helping us see clearly and print more profit, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. So, go for it, Gavin.
As somebody that came in the industry, I didn't have any background in the industry. I came in from a corporate background. And I remember when I first came in having to get a warehouse, get the equipment, hire my first couple of employees. I did not know how I was going to make money for myself. I did not know. And it took me a long time actually to start making money for myself, where I could do this full time, right? I've since obviously sold the business and moved on to something else. But this whole profit thing, Cole and I, we've been talking about this a lot since this year and last year, about how to just shift your mindset running your business where, you're just not running this cog where it's not giving you what you need. You're just part of this money hungry machine that's just you paying everybody else's bill and it's not taking care of you. I'd love for you to talk. What do you see shops are doing that are wrong when it comes to that? And what's one or two things they could do right up front to help them make more money, make profit for themselves.
Yeah. I'd say fundamentally it starts with understanding your cost. Because the typical way we come up with our sales price is we take our cost and do something with it. And then we think we're making a profit, but it's actually a mirage because our cost isn't accurate. And then we're also going to our customers with a price based off of our costs, and they don't give two rips about our cost. That's not their problem. So let's back up just a little bit for that statement.
Yeah.
I feel like for decades and decades, and I know because I've bought hundreds of books online from eBay, looking at from the 1800s, how has manufacturing and printers thought about cost, pricing, profit? And it's like these old stone tablets that our generations passed down. But we've over-engineered and complicated what is a job cost to a point where it's so misleading and misguiding. So we take these crazy formulas of all the cost in the business and we try to sprinkle it in to what is that in a job, and we've lost reality. So the secret is keep it simple, stupid, right? Like to produce a t-shirt, we've got the blanks, maybe we got a DTF transfer, some minimal ink. That's one, materials. And then did we pay a sales rep commission to sell that job? If so, that's legit. Number two. Number three, if we shipped it to the customer, that's a legit cost. If we didn't have the job, we wouldn't have the cost. And then lastly, maybe you didn't do it in-house and you just sent it to someone down the street. I'd call that outsourcing. That is another legit cost of a job. Everything else in your business, that's part of the overhead that you have to climb every month. So see how just what I'm explaining is fundamentally day and night different from taking all of the costs, figure out how to jam it into a job, to saying, let's go back to reality and keep it simple, stupid. This is what it costs to produce that job. And then what we do from there onwards, we'll get to that part, but I just want to hit pause here. I unloaded a lot. What are your thoughts as I'm explaining that philosophy and how it's just so radical to how we ended up 2025?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I learned at Shirt Agency was that I had no idea what to do about the overhead component. And I was perfectly fine with the cost of goods component. And so most of my entire business was built on the cost of goods. And then there was also an element of just market competition that just, it's like, I cannot sell this for 16. It would be a great idea. But because it's a nice blank and because it's maybe 100-piece run and it's back and front, everyone in LA will sell this to them between $9 and $11. So I just can't even move to what I think is accurate. So I'd love to dive into the overhead component. I mean, for me, my overhead got pretty wild. It was like my fixed overhead was somewhere close to $40K.
Yeah.
But even if you're working on the small scale, like one of my employees started his own shop, and now his fixed overhead is somewhere around $2K. Like a very small. He does one of those kind of co-working warehouse things.
Okay.
So he's being really smart about it. But I would just love to hear how you even do the math on that. Like, if you have those fixed costs, how would you incorporate that into a price that's competitive in an already wildly, commoditized market?
Yeah. The way that I think about it, and I'll share my journey, it was completely unbiased. I was living in Germany for the third time. I had to do a thesis. And I'm like, this costing, pricing, profit is so messed up. Let me dedicate a year and try to figure it out. But where I really found the aha moment was learning about this contribution margin concept. So Cole, for example, let's run with your 40K a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Woo, we're starting to sweat. 40K, that's a big amount. And if you want to get to profitability, that means you got to cover that overhead before you see a penny of profit. So with this whole contribution concept, which has been around for ages, it really makes it black and white. When we say, what did we sell that shirt for? $100. We subtract out the those 4 variable costs that I talked about, call it $50. We just generated for the business $50 to help us climb that 40K mountain. So think of it like a little thermometer. Every job that you ship in that month, sales minus variable cost, that's your ammo, that's your fuel to get to your break even. And then every job after that, you're into profit. So that's just like cold, hard facts, black and white, how we get to profit. And then we've got some levers. So how can we optimize our fixed cost? Is there an opportunity to get down to 37, or is really 40? There's not much fat to trim there. Okay, fixed costs, we can't really change that. Got it. What about how much we sell? And for what we do sell, the products, to what customers, to what pricing, it almost becomes a game to say, how can we generate as much contribution as possible? And that's where there's no silver bullet answer. There's a lot of creativity. But I want to just kind of start there of the cold hard facts of, you got that mountain. We understand now that each job, what's left over, it's helping us. And then how can we get creative as a team to say, hey, from an operations standpoint, what do we produce really efficiently and flows through? Got it. From a finance hat, how much contribution is it giving us? Got it. From a sales and marketing standpoint, who's our customers? What industries? Where does that play? Let's come together as a team and have like a good company strategy to get as much contribution as possible. What are your thoughts on that approach?
I would love to know if, with that contribution concept, which makes perfect sense, is there a healthy percentage of gross sales that you would attribute that to? So if you're doing 200K, the 40K is okay because it's X amount, or is there some sort of math that somebody could start prescribing there?
Yeah, a simple way they could do it is run your QuickBooks and just do a P&L by month. So do it for 2024. And these are standard reports in QuickBooks. And it's going to spit out an Excel that has January through December of 2024, each month as its own column. And then each row is just all of your costs in your business. But if you say, what did we sell each month? And we subtract out those 4 variable costs, what is left over is the contribution dollars that your business generated. And if you take that as a percentage of what you sold, that's your contribution margin percentage. I typically see for apparel decorators between 50 and 60% as the norm. Below 50, I'd want to put a little magnifying glass on it. Anything above, really, really attractive. And then you get a clear sense to say, hey, this is how much I have to sell to break even. Or if I want to be this profitable, this is probably what it's going to take to sell. That's just some simple math, hopefully not too complicated. Sales minus variable costs equals contribution dollars. And then just divide that by what you sold, and that's your percentage. That's a great place to start to get a good look and feel of what it means for your shop.
Yeah, to me, when you're describing that, it feels very clear, actually. It feels clear that at least those costs, you're not going to be able to control those costs, right? The blanks, know what those are up front, right? If you know what those are, then the rest you just got to, because everything else is just, it's already tight. You cannot lower your rent for the most part. You're not going to be able to change your equipment payment. Like, those are locked in. And if you're looking at it like that, hey, you could get to the 15th job of the month or the 20th job of the month. You have a lot more motivation to like get to that really fast. So I actually really like that thinking.
And you're onto something, Gavin. Typically as shop owners, when we think about our sphere of control, typically we say we write the checks, right? Cutting costs. That's what I can control, right? What the market, what the customers are willing to pay, what my competitors, I don't have control. It's just, I'm writing the checks. Is there anything I can do there? Typically, this is the framework. But by thinking through the contribution lens and being creative, you flip that narrative upside down, saying, yes, controlling costs are important. Don't get me wrong. But like you said, Gavin, typically we're running pretty lean and mean. There's no magical wand and taking that 40K that we talked about per month and getting it down to 30. So with that being said, how do we get creative of what do we produce? Who do we sell it to? How do we position it? And that is where the secret sauce is. That's where we play Moneyball in the printing industry, and some magic can happen. It does require hard work and creativity, but that's the secret sauce, guys.
You know what's always tricky for me is payroll or just like people costs, right? What's tricky about it is like, yeah, your equipment, you got to pay that, right? Well, the payroll, you have to pay it as well. But it's like, to me, it always feels like, all right, let's say I have to hit 30K in a month, right?
Yep.
Is that 30K, am I already assuming what my payroll cost is into that?
Yes. When we talk about that mountain, that 40K example, that is, if we look at all the costs in your business or in your QuickBooks, remember we're taking out those 4 costs of what a job truly is. Everything else is part of your mountain. And a lot of people at Impressions got upset with me about changing the paradigm of thought. That's a story for another podcast or time. But like labor in our industry, it is fixed. I talk to any shop, they'll say, Nick, I'm this many days a week, this many shifts, this many hours, right? We're not paying these people per job and they can willy-nilly leave every day. We are much more structured as, yes, that is a fixed cost. It's part of our overhead. Now, does overtime happen? Yes, but it's much more part of our mountain than saying it's the cost of a job. That is misleading. And it goes back to having a mirage of profit. And I take it one step further. Just bear with me here. So many owners around the world, they pull their hair out because QuickBooks says they lost money. Okay, upsetting. But then all of the math they did for their jobs says they were making a profit, and they can't tie out, right? So this just goes back to a lot of flaws and misconceptions of this isn't helping us see clearly. Go back to the basics, 101, and let's stay there.
So with, talking about pulling your hair out, if I were listening to us, I would probably think that it almost feels like the only answer is increase your gross revenue with what we're talking about if you can't necessarily increase your price. So I'd love to hear you talk about how you create a pricing matrix and how you think things should be priced. Because I just hear people saying the customer will leave me if I go over $7, and then I'll have even less revenue and I won't even break even on my bills. So how do you approach pricing matrices, pricing structure?
I'm going to say one thing and we'll dive right into that. In terms of like a strategy of how we get to your desired level of profitability, we have a lot of levers. It's not just one, it's numerous ones. Costing, the cost of the fixed cost, the cost of a job, our sales. So it takes an army of all of that to get to where you want to go. But to dive into your question, Cole, pricing is so tricky. There's no silver bullet. I love the philosophy of let's have different tools in the toolbox for different scenarios. But where I hang my hat up a lot is saying I love trying to get to market price, wherever that might be, and do a plus or minus based off of secret sauce. So at the end of the day, the customer is the one who signs the check, right? So trying to figure out a strategy to say, how can I get to what I think market pricing is? And then for that customer, for that industry, for where my business is at in the month, is there any wiggle room up or down to fine tune it to try to get as much as I might be able to? And that's where using data really comes into play. So if we know historically you're selling jobs at about 60% contribution margin, okay, that's kind of what market pricing is, ballpark. But I know this customer, typically I'm at 75 or they're higher end, or I'm winning 10 out of 10 quotes that they give me. Maybe I'm leaving money on the table just by sticking at my average. Or you got those bottom feeders, you win 1 out of 10 quotes. And you know what? We are struggling this month. We've got a 40K mountain. We're not going to make it. Sometimes I might play that game and go down against kind of market price and meet that customer. Why? I need the contribution dollars, right? So it's a blended strategy, and that's where it's not easy. A lot of data helps, but trying to come up with a plan to fine tune where you do your pricing, where the matrix, pros and cons of everyone, even from the system I said, matrix is great because put something in, you get something out. It's quick. We get a lot of quotes every day. Downside is there's not much massaging there, right? There's no logic of where's my business at, who's that customer, what are they buying, blah, blah, blah. It's not taken into consideration. They're emailing you at midnight asking you to do a backflip and produce it tomorrow. So that's where I just try to say there's different tools for different scenarios, but the more you can have data at your hands to figure out that massage analogy, that's where cool things can happen.
When you talk about bottom feeders, and not to say that these companies are bottom feeders, but what it immediately comes to mind for me is like the contract deals that you make. So, for example, we did a lot of stuff with Fresh Prince, who, once again, are not bottom feeders. They're nice people. But their entire structure is that they would give us X amount of jobs weekly. And they were really big in the sorority fraternity market. So if you need to print for someone, you can reach out to them, and they always need printers nationwide.
Yeah.
But they would pay us, sometimes we would do 100 shirts and we would get paid out $250. That sucks. But also it's $250 pays one of my printers for the entire day. And I still have a little bit of extra. And my printer probably prints 100 pieces on an auto in, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes by the time they set it up and tear it down.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that contract printing should be put inside of your company? I know there's obviously some shops that are just massive, farms for like fanatics, crazy contract only jobs. And then there's other people who kind of piecemeal it in. Do you feel there's kind of a healthy approach for the average small to mid-sized shop? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Where my brain goes, of course, it's situational, but let's go back to where we started this conversation. Printing profit, okay? Sales is vanity. I don't give two you-know-whats about sales. We're in it for the profit, two different things.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at it very black and white, saying we're profit-driven, we've got an overhead every month, and we've got a desired level of profit above that we'd like to have for our hard work. I look at it like it's a game, saying where do you want to go and what do you want to fill in your plan of how to get there? The reality is what I see, a lot of shops have open capacity and we want to be profitable. And it may be a hybrid where, you know what? We got people standing around, they're fixed costs. I can't let them go home. We're just keeping our head above water, break even, maybe adding in lower margin contract work to fill that open capacity to help get more contribution dollars. Maybe that's part of your strategy. I see a lot of companies have different blends of businesses, contract, non-contract that they bring in to, at the end of the day, black and white, generate a certain amount of contribution. Now, over time, what the name of the game with our capacity, we want to kick out the low contribution and fill that time with customers or products who give us a better contribution. But the reality is a lot of us have open capacity, and you know what? We got to get to profit land. So that's where having a hybrid approach could be a great just mindset of, it could be a blend of numerous things, but it's all goes back to the game of business of we want to be this much profitable and how do we get there?
Yeah, I remember when I ran my shop, we had one auto, so we had not too much at the time when we had one auto. We didn't have too much business planned with the contract printing because we could put on a job that's contract that takes us all day when we got other job that's very profitable. That's like holding up in the queue. So it was always a tough thing. Had If I had to go back and redo it again, is I would make my terms of service for those contract jobs a lot more favorable to me. Was like, hey, I could run your job, but I need a lot more time, right? And I need the flexibility to move those around. I think that's the conversation that shop owners are not having. And because I've heard like advice where, hey, don't take contract work because you are taking garbage work that nobody wants. But I'm also hearing you saying, hey, we need to get this contribution margin up. Like, and both of them are making sense. I think the blend is, yeah, you could take it, but like make sure your terms with your customer is super tight and that you have flexibility.
And like you're saying, cold-blooded killer, how much contribution, right? And contract is fascinating. It gets a lot of bad reps of, well, you don't make any money on that. So if you go back to contribution methodology, sales minus variable cost, typically there's no variable cost with contract work. They're providing the garments, material done, maybe no sales commission. You're not outsourcing it. You're doing it. Maybe you don't even have to ship it. That's pure contribution, baby. And you got a 40,000 mountain you got to climb. So it's situational. And Gavin, you mentioned time. I want to nerd out a bit here. Our industry typically thinks about margin in terms of dollars. So if I gave you job A and job B, and I said job A gave you $100 of contribution and job B gave you 50, which one would you take? Simple. Which one?
Go with the highest one.
Of course.
Job A.
Right? But where there's secret sauce, and this is a little more sophisticated, margin per hour, contribution per hour. So if we know we staff our plant this many hours a month, how do we moneyball that thing and get the best contribution per hour to generate a whole crap ton of this? And that's fascinating. Little to no one in our industry tracks time per job, but if you do, you can start to say, hey, those little jobs that make little contribution, typically I said they're not sexy. That's a low contribution dollar. But by golly, per hour, ooh-wee, we're flying. So what if I did more of that in my plant and filled up 8 hours a day doing that versus that long run job that only gave me so much? And I've worked with printers around the world who start to think that way. And that changes how they run their factory or their shop. So isn't this a fun topic? Like there's so much creativity and it's also frustrating because there's not an easy answer. But I think what we're talking about here and shops listening, you have options and there's creativity. So that's empowering.
I remember, I'm pretty sure Brett from Printed Threads created a calculator years and years ago, like 2017 or so, that was based on shop hours. And it was really interesting to see his math because at the time I was so fixed on cost of goods and like desperately trying to keep at least 40% or more of the revenue that came in. And I remember Brett telling me back then that he basically considered any shop hour worth $400. And he had multiple presses running, but if it took an hour for anywhere inside of his shop to do something, he needed a $400 floor for a shop hour. And I would wonder what you would say to that kind of structure when you are creating kind of your original basis for your company. Because so many people think a little bit less about that.
My thoughts are this. I hear a lot in podcasts, not all the time, but when we go down this rabbit hole, we think about our rent and how many hours. Mm-hmm. And if we do more hours, that got cheaper per hour. I think that's a fallacy and you're screwing with your head. At the end of the day, your fixed cost is your fixed cost or whatever component. And I think there's a slippery slope. The more you try to divide it and make it seem smaller, forget it. Your mountain's 40, and I'm simplifying it a little bit too much, but I don't get caught up in the whole dividing the costs by all this time because a lot of it is fixed. your software, your Printavo subscription, your lease, your insurance, blah, 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 no matter what you divide it by, that sucker is X per month. So I try to go back to KISS acronym as much as I can and just keep it simple and not try to divide it out. But there is some valid parts of, yes, per day, per hour. I'm not against that. But when you start getting beyond that, it's like you're blurring reality, and that's where even hang with me here. I used to work for one of the largest gift card manufacturers in the United States. And we would often, as a senior leadership team, when we would look at, we estimated a job to cost this much. If we ran it a little bit faster, we made more money on that job. Or if it took a little longer, crap, we lost money. But then you go back to contribution thinking, you know what? Whether you were plus or minus 20 minutes, it's the same contribution dollars. Now, time is important, right? If you're delaying the amount of time per job for each and every job, probably you're going to have to run more overtime, or your ability to run more jobs in the month will decrease. So it's a fine line, but I just want to poke some holes and maybe stimulate some thought about common ways we think about cost and dividing it, stuff like that. Are you jiving with me, or am I sounding crazy here?
No, you sound very logical. One thing that for me, and I think for a lot of people, one guy at Impressions actually told me that he was 10K in the hole because of this. But the variable for me, and I actually have to pay them today, is the quarterly or yearly tax that you're going to end up owing. And so today I'm going to have to finish my filing for my California quarterlies. And I don't know until I do it today what the hell I'm going to pay. Like, I might owe $3,000 or I might owe $12,000. And I kind of have to like sit there and do it. And without me kind of sitting there and doing it, I kind of don't know how screwed I am right now for my quarterly or yearly tax filing. How do you think people can kind of know going in? I mean, you can have you think you have an amazing quarter, and then at the end of the quarter, you're like, oh, I didn't save the taxes. Like, what the hell am I going to do?
That's where we talk about pulling up your QuickBooks and looking at your historical performance by month and looking at all of the costs involved and getting kind of an average. Yeah. You want everything in there. That is full blown to the cost of toilet paper, right? We want to take all the costs. So you're really not leaving anything at the table or, forgetting it.
Yeah, the tax, that tax thing almost bit me in the butt too. So it is a thing that all of us in Florida, you have the resale where you have to collect the tax for the estate and turn that back. So you have to have a lot of discipline not to spend the tax money. And it's a tricky thing. It is a tricky thing because you still have your overhead that you got to cover.
Yeah.
And sometimes you could dip into that, and when it's time to give them their money, I think what helped us, I'm not sure how you feel about this, Nick, because you haven't mentioned it, Profit First, when we started to dabble into that, putting money away for a certain thing that made it like a lot more clear. What's your thought on that? Do you preach to people that they should use that system?
I love learning from all different sources every day, right? I'm thirsty, always keep an open mind. I read about half the book. I've caught a lot of podcasts. It hasn't done a lot for me. Mm-hmm. I think it comes from a good place and an attempt to have discipline and kind of like, I think it comes from a good place, but in terms of application and day to day and trying to keep it simple, mm-hmm. It kind of loses me there. That's just my personal take. Didn't finish the book, so unfair for me to judge halfway through, but it doesn't blow my hair back like a contribution or those kind of topics.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler, at the end of the book, you find out the guy killed his wife. So it's you really missed out on an amazing twist ending.
Ruining the book for
No. So
Holy crap.
let's talk about software, because you've mentioned QuickBooks a few times, but people have whatever they're using, QuickBooks or that whatever's integrated into their invoice software, or from what I understand, a lot of people have no accounting software at all, and they just deal with whatever Printavo spits out,
Yeah.
or somebody similar to Printavo. But let's be honest, most people have Printavo. So let's talk about the software. What are the tools that people are missing that are so valuable that could give them like a daily vision of their business and not a quarterly because they have to look at it finally?
Yeah, so you summarized our industry quite well. You have a shop management system end to end. It doesn't necessarily go super deep in all aspects, but it
Right.
covers you end to end, right? It can't be everything to the max. And then you got your bookkeeping. But in my journey and talking about, print profit, I saw a huge gap in the market of having something that goes deeper and uses data to make it clear, the whole making money aspect. So you could, through a Printavo QuickBooks environment, try to hack together and build something, but it is complicated. And that's not specific to Printavo, right? I'm talking all shop management systems in general. And QuickBooks isn't giving you what you fully need. It's doing the bookkeeping part, but breaking down profit clearly and what can you take to improve it, forget it. So that was my driver, to create something in between where I'm not here to reinvent QuickBooks or a shop management system. I just want to take those two sources of information and create something that doesn't exist to give those shop owners that 2020 vision.
So what does that look like in just kind of function and like daily use cases? Like if I were on the software, I would do what with it on a Tuesday?
Yep. You'd be staring at the heartbeat of your business to see in real time, are you going to make or lose money in the month? And seeing that clearly by day. So for example, if it were February 1st, you know how that whole month plays out, and you already know how March is looking. So that's the pulse of your business to say, okay, whether good, bad, or ugly, I can see with 2020 vision, not rear view, right? Finding out mid-February how we did in January, but truly real time. So that's like the core component. You're leading the ship. That's your cockpit. But then the second half of the software is way more important, and it's giving you those golden insights of how can you and your team move the needle today or tomorrow? What's something down to earth actual that they can do to get more profitable sales? You put those two things together, that's your 1-2 punch.
Is that all the way down to the product level? Because I remember one year an SNS rep showed up at our shop, and he said, "You guys are killing it with these tote bags. What happened?" And I had never realized that we had like tote bag game.
Yeah.
And is there something that inside of this kind of software where you're capable of seeing more profitable products inside of your structure because they're being categorized?
Yeah, we're looking at it by the job, the customer, the customer industry, the sales rep, the month that you're in. We're doing it by the facility, if you have multiple facilities. Product, if I didn't already say it, the process, DTF, DTG, screen, and then even the specific garment. I mean, it's truly a Rubik's Cube to slice it and dice it and have it down to a science.
And you can literally like click whatever it is you want to filter by and have that answer. So you can realize, is 62% of my business is screen printing, maybe 10% is embroidery, and then you realize the rest is maybe like a DTF. Yep. And you're like, why do I have a $100,000 in embroidery machine sitting here if it's only 10% of my business?
Yep.
Instead of just kind of looking at your gross.
And that's where, in our earlier conversation, right, the creativity and coming up with a strategy, you really need data. And I think it's an art and a science, right? But you put those two together, then you've got an arsenal to to make hay and come up with a good strategy. So that's where just trying to help with the data side to say, here's the opportunities, go focus.
So Nick, into the dashboard that's in your software, how does the data get into it? Am I having to manually put it in? Is it pulling it from somewhere, like a spreadsheet or a shop management tool? Like, how's that working out?
Going back to the mission of why I started it, I want to move this industry forward for small, medium, and large. I didn't want to build this to have a have and have not just for big boys. So to answer your question, Gavin, it's super creative. If you're a small shop, you don't have any shop management software, you can spend 30 seconds and just enter in information about a job, and then you've got big boy insights. So that's manual input.
Mm-hmm.
Where we have a lot of API integrations with like your Shopworks, your Printavos, your Decos of the world. That is automatically grabbing the data in real time, so you're good. Mm-hmm. We have some shop floor management systems or shops who use Excel. We can load that in and populate it. And then for big boy shops, or maybe you're crazy enough to build your own homegrown shop system, we can have the software talk together. So that's a big challenge of Print Profit, where every shop is unique. And how do we try to meet you where you're at with what you have in order to make this feasible?
Mm. So the way Print Profit would, I'm just trying to picture it. Let's say I have a medium-sized shop, 2 autos. Am I throwing this on my TV so as my dashboard, or my, because this is like financial information, right?
Yeah.
How's that work?
We built this to empower the whole team, and we know different team members have different focuses. So definitely for the leadership team, you've got your shop floor management, maybe YouTube when you're bored, want to watch a video, and you got Print Profit up at all times, right? Because that's the pulse of the business. We've got people on the shop floor who are using it, and we can turn off the sensitive financial information that's not relevant, and it's helping them. So really, it's trying to fit all the different members of the team for whatever their roles are. But more importantly, what we're talking about here, guys, you're getting a team who's rowing the boat in the same direction. And that's a powerful thing versus having silos of information. Or heck, maybe the shop owner, like the majority of our industry, just they don't even know themselves. Now we can see clearly and work together as a team because we win and lose together at the end of the day.
And I think it's really important for, especially the sales team anyway, to understand where the business is at and what we're trying to accomplish. I worked with one guy who would literally every Monday announce to his entire team, like, we made this amount of money. The best sale was this salesperson. And it was just like a blatant rundown of the numbers. And being able to see that inside of a portal that's accessible to everyone can be really either motivating or even just scare them enough to try harder, because they're like, wow, I didn't realize it, but we're down 30 grand. So I love that as kind of like a business KPI, like everyone has this indicator for the health of the business. Inside of like the idea of creating a profitable shop and using these tools, what do you think is kind of the future of this with all the AI integrations that people are implementing? Do you feel like people will be able to see more and more granular data going forward? Or do you think that in some ways we almost don't need to know because we can kind of let the automation work for itself?
Yeah, I see clearly, and this isn't future talk like for Print Profit 2025. This is where we're going, where the secret sauce is those proactive insights where it makes it super easy. Good morning, Cole. Here's everything you need to know about your business, or maybe your sales rep. Here's everything you need to know about your customer base. Here's your to-do list. Here's the customers falling off. Here's all the customers who ordered shirts and never a hat, right? Print Profit, or even just data in general, with AI and different technology, it's really going to be all about the insights and where you need to focus on versus today where it's either blind or your report heavy and you're having to do the manual horsepower and think, right? Right around the corner is just tell me what I need to know. So kind of being like the Siri for your print shop. What about this? Tell me that. Boom, you got it.
And that kind of data is really powerful because without manually doing it in something like a Printavo, to be able to go into the software and say, who is everyone that has spent 50 grand per year with me and hasn't ordered in the last 6 months, and then output that for a marketing campaign exclusively to them, or literally have your salespeople call them directly. That's really powerful data that people have technically, but they're not necessarily accessing.
Cool, let's pimp it out. Then you do the automations on top of that. And we're going to be the laziest sales rep ever, because you know what? The insights are there. The automations are connected. Sit back and wait for a paycheck.
Perfect. Well, I mean, I think...
Nick, so you say you've been to 40 countries. I'm a little bit jealous. I've been to 18.
That's still insane.
That's a good number too, Gavin.
Yeah. So what countries have you been in? What's been your favorite?
I lived in Germany 3 times for one of the largest offset printing manufacturing companies in the world. They're called Heidelberg. I really love Germany. That was, if I didn't already say, about 6 years.
What city was that?
In Heidelberg, Germany. It's confusing, the town and the city.
Okay.
But
did you pick up the accent? Okay.
I learned German. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You were supposed to say 9.
9?
No.
But yeah, I take a lot of different things from different cultures, like living in Brazil, how personable they are, having that strong connection, really living life versus a work. Worked also in Asia and different intensities. Like it's amazing picking up different things, but we talk about our industry, common challenges, no matter what language, no matter what country, costing, pricing, profit, still a tricky one.
Awesome. Well, I'd love for you to let people know how to get a hold of you. I think that this was really valuable just to get people to remember that they're supposed to be making money while working full time. So how do people reach out to you? How do people find the company online?
Yeah, really grateful for the chance to be on the podcast. I've listened for years. If you'd love to talk further, you can just catch me at printprofit.com, schedule a call. I'd love to learn more about your business and how can we print more profit.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And I hope that everybody has a very profitable 2025. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.